What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Modern Nest Realty Podcast. I'm your host, Darren Swain, the owner and proud broker in charge of Modern Nest Realty, located in downtown Concord off of Church Street. And today's episode is all about tiny homes. All right, so holler if you're with me, guys. A lot of people have gotten more interested in tiny homes in the last couple of years. Okay, and a lot of people use those as primary residences or build them for vacation homes or vacation retreats and stuff like that. So, on today's episode, we're going to have a little mini class on tiny homes, guys. We're going to talk about how to do it the proper way, what to look out for, and how you need to go about building your tiny home. So to get us started, I really want to take a second and talk about why are tiny homes so freaking popular now. And I think that it has a lot of different reasoning to it, okay? So in 2022, guys, national median rent surpassed $2,000 per month, and that is a lot. Guys, that is a lot. Imagine like being 18, getting your first job, and trying to pay $2,000 a month rent, off the wages that people are making today. Like that's kind of crazy. But that pretty much brings the median rent to income ratio to 57%. All right. And that is almost two times the normal recommended 30% rent to income ratio. Okay. And if you live in the Charlotte market, you may or may not know that Charlotte home prices, the average home price increased from like 54%, guys, from 2020 to 2022, and that looks like 273,000 to $420,000. Okay, so that is a big deal. We are also dealing with something, guys, called the Great Resignation. You probably haven't heard about this, but the Great Resignation is when all of these professionals have pretty much voluntarily left their line of work after January 2021. Okay, and guys, the numbers are pretty crazy. 18.8 million people have left the leisure and hospitality field. Okay, 16.7 million people have left professional business services careers. All right, 14.6 million have left retail, like 12 million have left healthcare and social assistance, and the numbers go on and on and on. Okay, so I think people nowadays are restructuring their life after COVID. I think they want more bang for their buck. I think they don't want to work 60, 70-hour weeks anymore. They've really realigned their commitments and what makes them happy, and I think that's why you see the tiny home trend becoming such a big thing, coupled with home prices rising and income levels not really rising to meet that as quickly. Okay, so that's all the real estate nerd stuff I have for you in regards to numbers and what's going on and why I feel like tiny homes are becoming a more popular thing. But I think they're here to stay, guys. And when it comes to how to go about your tiny home, I want you guys to always make sure you are working with a verified, trusted real estate professional. Okay, that's always where you start, because you don't want to spend a bunch of money, buy land that you can't use for what you want to use it for. Right? Nobody wants to do that. Unless you just want to buy some land just to mow the grass or do whatever. If that's your thing, then call me and we'll find you somewhere to mow, okay? But when it comes to doing a tiny home, you're basically going to have two options, okay? And that's going to look like a custom built tiny home or something that's more prefabricated. Okay, custom built, that's where you are designing it, you are building it from start to finish, right? The prefabricated route, guys, can go range anywhere from $10,000 or less to like $150,000, right? So some tiny homes are so big that they're basically just a bungalow. But some tiny homes are as small as like 400 or 500 square feet. So it really just depends on what you're trying to do and how able you are to either build your own, or maybe you need something prefabricated. Okay, now prefabricated, that can look a couple of different ways. That can be just basic stuff. That's where there probably isn't drywall. It's probably more or less just the shell of the tiny home, and then you have to finish out the finishes and complete the interior. Or you can buy prefabricated tiny homes, guys, that are fully finished, that have a kitchen sink, that have tile, that have everything that you need. Okay, so those are basically your two options. Now, when it comes to Another classification of tiny homes, I want us to think about permanent tiny homes and temporary tiny homes, okay? Permanent tiny homes have a foundation where they permanently sit, okay? Like a stick-built home, right? Temporary tiny homes are going to be more like RVs. That's going to be more like tiny homes still on the trailer, still on stuff like that, to where it's a temporary thing. It's not permanently affixed to the land, okay? Now, when it comes to the permitting process, when you get into doing the tiny home, guys, you have to work with an agent that knows where to take you and how to shop with you, right? So, land, guys, when you buy land, you can run into two things. If you buy land and it has what's called CC&Rs, or covenants, conditions, and restrictions, that is going to limit how you can utilize that property, okay? Also, if the property is within an HOA, that is going to create limitations for how you can use that property, right? Holler if you with me. But when it comes to the covenants and restrictions, guys, you have to check those with your agent and make sure that you can build a tiny home. I've seen a lot in covenants and restrictions before where it's like the minimum required square footage to build is like 1,500 square feet. Okay, so if you're building a 450 square foot tiny home, you cannot build it if that restriction is on the land, okay? These restrictions, guys, in the wise words of Bill Gallagher, run with the land and stay with the land, okay? So you can't do anything with that. You are purchasing that land subject to those conditions that you have to follow, right? So the first thing, you want to make sure you find some land or somewhere that you can utilize for a tiny home, okay? Because, guys, you're going to want to go through the permitting process. You're going to want to make it legal because that is going to allow you to, one, resell it in the future and not have nearly the amount of issues, and two, to get insurance coverage on the property. Now, I know a lot of people say you were doing a drastic downsize and say you were like selling your primary residence and you're taking all your equity and you're going to pay cash for a tiny house and cash for the land. Great. We love it, right? But you're still going to want to have homeowners insurance on that property. It's very similar to like having a car that's paid off, right? When you have the loan on the car, you have to have full coverage most times because you have a loan on it. When you buy your tiny house, guys, you're still going to want to have like the homeowners insurance and that kind of coverage for your property, okay? Another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind when you are custom building these tiny homes or you're looking at these tiny houses, guys, I really want you to consider safety, all right? Now, I know safety is not usually the most sexy, but these are very small units that have limited windows, limited doors, stuff like that. If you have a fire or you have something going on in a tiny home, you're in a very confined space, right? You're going to want to really consider safety, guys, the products that you put into the homes and stuff like that to make sure that you don't have like catastrophic issues with your home, okay? Now, once you have your land and you figured out what you've done, you're going to do, and you're working with your agent and stuff like that, then you're going to kind of start going through the permitting process and really investigating that up front, guys, to see what that really entails, because county per county, it may look a little different, right? Generally across the board, guys, you are going to have a foundation inspection and stuff like that if this is a permanent dwelling, and you're going to have a permit for your water source, right? Whether you are on a septic tank or you're on city, you're tapping into city or something like that, you're going to want to have those amenities permitted so that they are legal and they are done correctly, guys. Again, code is the minimum safety requirement, right? It's not the ceiling. It's not the, maximum most safety. It is the minimum of what you have to do in order to construct a tiny home, okay? Once you go through that process, guys, and you have done the permitting and stuff, then it's a great option. It's a great option for people who are downsizing. It's a great option for a vacation home. I know a lot of people who like hunt and fish on their own land and stuff love a tiny house. So some people love it as a permanent, residence, only residence. So, it really just depends on what you are trying to do with the tiny home. I will tell you that generally here in North Carolina, if you are in the temporary tiny home, either on a trailer, on wheels, or something like that, you typically cannot occupy that space for more than 180 days, okay? because it's just not a thing. You can't do it. So make sure that you are being careful, guys, and you are working with an agent when it comes to building a tiny house and getting that prepared and stuff like that. There are a couple of different places in North Carolina and close by where you can shop prefabricated tiny homes if you're not going to full out build your tiny home. What I will tell you though, guys, and this is some tips from the investor podcast that we have coming in the future, but when it comes to building anything custom, guys, you're going to want to measure a million times, right? Because you are building a small space, especially if you're doing a tiny home, and different materials, the sizes range. Right? One fridge may be a certain dimension, and then another fridge could be totally different. When you're building a tiny home, you don't have a lot of room to play with, right? And you're going to want to have sufficient walkways, sufficient, space inside the home to maneuver and get around. And you're going to want to include a little bit of extra space here and there so that stuff, has room to move and has room to grow. Make sure that you're being very careful when it comes to measuring and stuff. If you're building it on your own, guys, I highly encourage you to work personally with a general contractor, okay? And I'm not talking your Uncle Bubba who was familiar with what code was in 1990. I'm talking a licensed general contractor that has an active license and who is also insured, okay? And pro tip for me, if it has a comma in it, so anything over $999, okay? If it has a comma in it, then we need a contract, okay? A lot of people make the mistake in investing, and I was one of those people who create agreements with vendors over handshakes, over, verbal agreements and stuff like that. Guys, if it has a comma, it needs a contract, okay? If you do not have a relationship with an attorney that can draft vendor agreements and different work documents for you like that, reach out to me and I will send you a couple to reach out to. But you're going to want to make sure that you have that agreement in writing because that is what is going to take precedence, all right? Because if you don't, what I can promise you will happen is the budget will double and the timeline will triple. Okay, and my rule of thumb when it comes to investing in general is you need to have double the amount of money that you think it's going to take, and you're going to need double the amount of time. And guys, I was watching a TV show or a clip of a TV show the other day, and I heard Lisa Vanderpump from the owner of the Vanderpump restaurants and all that stuff, and on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I heard her say, make sure you have double the money and expect double the time. And I thought to myself, I was like, that is the words of someone who has done it. Glory to God, amen. And from somebody who's invested and done a flip property myself, that is the absolute case, okay? If you don't have double the money to do it and double the timeline to do it, don't start. You can never, ever, ever spend enough time in the discovery phase of a project, guys. Once you have moved through the discovery phase and you are in construction, you got things moving and shaking, you cannot go back to discovery. Once discovery is done, it's done. It's a wrap. You are moving into action and stuff like that. So make sure you're very careful with that, guys. Make sure that you have an attorney that drafts you a really good vendor agreement so that you have accountability and stuff like that, okay? My number 2 biggest tip is make sure you're only working with licensed, insured contractors, okay? And I want to know who your insurance company is before I even know the name of your company and what your reviews look like or what your pricing is, okay? If you do not have insurance coverage, my friend, and you are coming onto my property to, potentially chop your face off, like that's going to be an issue. Right? I don't want to carry all of the liability in, making sure everything's safe and stuff like that. We want to have these service providers, guys, have their own insurance and stuff like that and make sure that you get that information, okay? It doesn't matter if they have it if you don't have that information. Right? Because when something pops off and you have an issue or something happens, you're not going to want to try to go to that contractor to hold them directly accountable, okay? You're going to want to call up that insurance and be like, hello, I need to make a claim, So make sure you're doing those things, guys. If you are curious to investing in real estate and stuff like that, I am a certified real estate investment planning specialist, and we have a podcast in the future that I'm working on about kind of more in depth of what investing really looks like and ways to protect yourself. And tiny homes is no different, right? You can spend $200,000 plus building a tiny home and buying the land and stuff like that. So a lot of those tips and tricks are going to kind of go hand in hand with each other. But my thing on tiny houses is I think they're here to stay. I think they are totally appropriate. I think they are a affordable source of housing for people. I do know that here in my area, I believe Habitat for Humanity has plans to do stuff with tiny houses. And I think they are considering some stuff like that and working on some stuff. But there are different places in North Carolina and in states close by where you can purchase prefabricated tiny homes that range from, just the studs needing drywall and interior finishes all the way to fully built out everything, including the kitchen sink. You just bring your own soap and clothes and stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I hope it gave you a little bit more insight when it comes to building a tiny home. Obviously, there are a million other details that go into the process. This is kind of just a little 10,000 square foot view of the tiny house situation. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me in my office. We'd love to have you in for an appointment. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.